So everyone on this call, for those of you who aren't familiar with Iftikhar, Iftikhar and his partner Elizabeth Dadi have collaborated in their art practice for 20 years. Their work investigates memory, borders, and identity in contemporary globalization and the productive capacities of urban information in the global south and the mass culture of post-industrial societies. They've exhibited all over the world, such as the Asia Pacific Triennial, the Pompidou Center, our Dhaka Art Summit, the Whitechapel Gallery, many places around the world. The Lahore Biennale as well. And in addition to his artistic practice, Professor Dadi is an associate professor in Cornell's Department of Art History. He's also very active in the Institute for Comparative Modernities. And I believe you're also the chair of the South Asia department, no, Iftikhar?
Yeah, the South Asia program.
Yeah, and he has he's been a part of our Dhaka Art Summit 2016, 2018, and 2020, and someone really at the forefront of making these cross-border collaborations happen, both from Cornell, but also in his own artistic practice and his work advising the Lahore Biennial and contributing to so many different initiatives in the region. So thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Diana. Thank you, Vidya. Thanks to all of you for being here. So I'm actually very excited to see all of you and to see this initiative. And it's, and I was asked to speak about, collaboration. And I just wanted to say a few words about really the history of collaboration in our region, as you know, in South Asia, we've been, there have been groups that have, so collaboration can take many forms, right? They can be formal, it can be informal, it can be temporary, it can be permanent, in terms of forming a group. It can be on a project basis, or it can be on, and all of these are in some sense, good ways of working, and they're valid, right? And of course, in the last 2 or 3 decades, with the rise of contemporary art, there has been more emphasis on, the idea that that individuals and groups can come together and collaborate on projects. And these things are they are exciting for me. I always find collaboration to be more helpful in the sense that I benefit from learning from the ideas of my collaborators. But it's also the case that one has to be, I think we have become more aware of how one has to be careful in terms of attribution and giving credit, and in a sense, and the best way to do that is to keep the lines of communication as open and transparent as possible, right? So you may want to collaborate together as on a temporary basis, and just be aware that that it's a collaboration that needs to, the terms of the collaboration are kind of, in a sense, laid out so people don't have misunderstanding, right? The other issue that's very important for our region is the because we live in a society with a very, very, hierarchical societies, right? And societies that are very much divided by caste and class and, all these things, right? So, and in many cases, many artists rely upon, let's say, artisans or fabricators or people to make their work. Okay, so that can also be thought of as a kind of a collaboration, in the sense that you're not simply making all the work by yourself, right? But you're also working with what I would call the productive capacities of larger society. Okay, okay, which I like to do, because I, in the sense that the productive capacities of larger societies enable enormous possibilities for expression. Okay, and this is certainly the case in our region, where we have a very rich culture of both, kind of artisanal work, informal practices, industrial practices, all sorts of, and again, in a sense, the idea of, issues of this have been brought forth by academic disciplines like subaltern studies that talk about how some people's voices become invisible, right? So there's always a danger in these things, but I think the risks are worth taking, and it's important to think of collaboration in all sorts of different ways, provided one is in a sense, as transparent as and as upfront about these as possible, right? I mean, in many cases, I see, for example, there are artists who don't actually make their own work at all, right? They just make the designs and other people execute it, but then they don't acknowledge the fact that their work has been produced, and it's not simply like industrial production; it's also artisanal production, right? In the sense that it requires the specific skill sets of somebody that one doesn't have, or one doesn't have the time to do, etc. Right? So. And I think, in this day and age, with the demise of modernism, and that we are in contemporary art, world, I think contemporary art is much more hospitable to these, to experimental work, and to collaboration. So I think it's a very exciting time, and honestly, to be an artist and to really take risks, alone and together, okay, in various ways. I thought I would share with you a few projects, okay? So some of them I've done with, as Diana mentioned, I have a long-term collaboration with Elizabeth Dadi, who's also my partner. And I wanted to show you a few projects on that. I also wanted to show you a project which I did with an Indian artist, a well-known Indian artist, Nalini Malani, okay? And then I wanted to show you some projects by other artists, okay? So shall I begin, Vidya? Is this? Okay.
Yes. Can you share screen?
I think it's good also to get feedback if, in case, so I'm not the only one talking all the time. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we have some time. We have some time to have a discussion after your presentation. So
yeah. Okay.
I think we'll.
So I can give my presentations for about 30-35 minutes, something like that. Okay.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, so let me begin by the works that I made with Nalini Malani. So, and I'll share my screen now. Okay. So let me see. Sharing my screen. Okay. Okay. I'll try to make this big without. Okay. So I was born in Karachi, but my father's family is from Bombay. Okay, and I still have family members who live in Bombay from my father's side. And my mother, when I met, but as a Pakistani, as you know, the difficulties in visas and so on to get to India makes it difficult to visit. But anyway, I visited in 1997, okay, and I met actually before the year before that, I had met Nalini Malani in a project, in a show we were together in Copenhagen, and that was 1996. And the next year was 1997, which was a significant year because it was the 50 years of both the independence and partition of both India and Pakistan, right? And we thought that we should do something together as a way to commemorate, that, right? And so that led to a couple of initiatives. One was a show which was curated by Pooja Sood when she was just beginning her career, and that was at the Aisha Gallery. Okay, and it was a series of exhibitions she curated. And the other was a collaboration that we were asked to actually produce so Nalini Malani and myself were invited by a British museum to create a collaborative work. Okay. And what we felt is that, so we discussed how we would make this work, and the fact that I was in India for a very, very short time, right? And so we thought that we would work with actually people who make who do zari work. So zari is the embroidery work, right? And this was Nalini's idea to think about making a map of South Asia. And making a map by employing zari workers who in both Bombay and in Karachi have they come from a marginalized, kind of, I mean, they're from the artisanal community, and they work. And so initially we thought we could make the work in Bombay, but we couldn't. So we ended up making the work in Karachi, okay? And it was made with, so it was made, Nalini and myself exchanged ideas. This was this was early days of email, okay? So we exchanged our ideas by email when we came back to Karachi. And we made a plan for the basically to make a map, okay, with sequent panels, which would draw the lines of the partition, which is both the line between what was West Pakistan, which is now Pakistan, and India, the Radcliffe line, okay, and also the line of East Bengal, right, which is now Bangladesh, right? Okay, and so the original work we made was actually lost. Okay, it was lost it was shown in a museum in England, and it was lost after that. Okay, so we decided, when we were asked to remake it, we decided to remake it, right? And so this was done by a group of these Ariwalas, or these embroidery. And these are mostly also migrants from India who have settled in Karachi. Karachi has a very large population of migrants who in 47 who came and settled in India. And so these are just some images of the work that this, Mr. This is the Abdul Khalik, who was the master, kind of artisan, and his team. Okay, and you can see the work being made based on the kind of the plans we made, right? And so it looks like this, right? So this is a close-up of the panel that they look like. So you have a very dense field, basically, of these sequins, okay? And they're in 3 colors: gold, red, and blue for the water. And this was Nalini's ideas to think about, really, to think about the plenitude of, in the sense that these lines, these border lines that divide us, are also dividing a sense of gold, of plenitude, of richness, okay, both cultural and economic and social richness that South Asia has, and that we are, in fact, carving up and dividing with these lines of blood, okay, okay. So it was both a work that tried to, in a sense, think about the question of borders and partitions, think about the question of collaboration, okay, across, between 2 artists living actually in places that they couldn't visit easily each other, right? And also thinking about how to make this work meaningful, also in terms of its fabrication, okay, in thinking about economics, okay, and about Nalini's idea was that in Bombay, her idea was that the people who do this work is actually women who do this embroidery work, okay, and we wanted to make work with them, but we couldn't. So we ended up making the work in Karachi, where the embroiderers are women but also men, right? So so you see here, okay. Okay, so now let me go to the next presentation, which is the work that I have made with Elizabeth, okay. And so this forms, as Diana mentioned, this forms a long-term collaboration that I have with Elizabeth. And Elizabeth is she's born in the United States. Okay, she grew up in the West Coast. She went to an art school in San Francisco, the San Francisco Art Institute. She also studied art history at Berkeley. And she actually, when I met her, in the late 1980s, she actually knew more about South Asian art than I did. Okay, okay, because she had actually studied it, and so anyway, we started to work together, from really the 90s onwards. But I want to show you just some recent projects, okay? And again, thinking about this this larger question that we are trying to investigate that has to do with not just collaboration between two artists, okay, but also thinking about our work in relation to what I call this larger realm of the productive capacities of society, right? So we think of our collaboration not just between ourselves, but we also think of it in relation to how we can collaborate with these larger, and much of these larger productive capacities. Many of them are in the realm of what would be called informality in South Asia, right? So, so I'm just going to show 3 recent projects. Okay, so one of them is a series of large-scale photographs. Okay, which are based on toys. Okay, so let me show you the images. So these are toys that are very, very small, right? They're only like about 1 inch or 1 inch or tiny, like this size. Okay, and they're made in the informal economy. Okay, and these are things that are extremely inexpensive. Okay, and I'm sure you'll find them also in India and in Bangladesh, right? And these are toys that are made with kind of recycled plastic, and they're really sold for, I mean, the elite children don't play with this, right? Because they buy the more expensive kind of toys, okay? But partly the fascination that we had with these is because, what happens with them is that they are made with injection molding, right, of plastic. But because the dyes or the metal, stamps that are used to make these become so overused, right, and so that they appear to be handmade, right? So you can see the kind of with the notion of finish, okay, in them, and so the question of this border between handmade and machine made is also an important place for us to be, right? To think about, if you think about like notions of authenticity, right? So when you think about like what is authentically maybe Indian, then you think of Indian craft or something like that, right? But of course, you don't think of machine-made urban objects as being authentic, right? In the sense, but this actually is the realm of where we live in, right? This is, in the mega cities of South Asia, which are among the largest cities in the world, okay, with all of their, millions of people employed in all sorts of, occupations, making things, okay, but then we don't recognize them as part of our cultural, part of our, what we might understand to be our cultural forms, right? We either look at high art, or we look at, pre-modern art, or we look at craft objects, okay, or we look at really contemporary art from internationally, right? Which is all fine, okay. But what I'm saying is that what this overlooks is this realm of informality, which we find to be a very productive place to kind of examine, right? And we do it through a number of projects. So this is a little tiffin, to carry food, okay, and you can see that it comes in different, colors and so on. And you have also objects like this little cassette player, okay, or a cell phone, okay, which comes in different kind of, and you can see the way that since there is no trademark, there is no copyright, there is no branding necessarily in this realm. What you have is also that you have that these objects proliferate, in terms of their design, in terms of variation, in terms of branding. Sometimes they may be put in little plastic bags with labels from some other discarded paper that is used to make a label. And the text just said cassette player here, and tiffin here, okay, in Urdu. So in one way, this is a kind of a documentation of this realm, but in another way, it's also a relationship with kind of modernist painting, right? If you think about color field painting, abstract painting, you think about people like Joseph Albers, okay, who thought about color relationships and geometry. So that's one of the things we try to do also, is that we also try to think about our work in art historical terms, right? So it's both a kind of an engagement with developments that are taking place in society that are overlooked, okay, but also the realm of art history, because the realm of art history is equally important for us. We are artists. We are not the workers in the informal realm, right? And in the sense that art history and artistic practice over the years has fashioned also important and powerful ways of making work, of making visually compelling artifacts. So that's an important engagement that we also don't want to lose, right? And some of these were shown in at Javeri Contemporary so you get a sense of the scale and the presentation. Okay, so the next I'll move to a project called Rozo Shab, okay? And Rozo Shab would be an example of a project that is by invitation. So when sometimes you may be invited to make a work in a site-specific location, right? So this is a site-specific, and it's meant to respond to the kind of the nature of the place, the specificity of the place, the history of the place, and the place we agreed to work in for the first Lahore biennial was this Mughal era summer palace. It's a 17th century structure, and it's actually under the Lahore fort. So it's a kind of a dungeon-like kind of space, okay? And it has all these kind of passageways for water and tiny windows that that are very deep. The walls are very thick, okay? So when you go inside the summer palace, you feel both. You can sense the outside world, okay? You can see the daylight, from a window, but you also feel like you're in another kind of a limbo, or a kind of a in a state of sensory suspension, right? And it also makes you aware of then the passage of time, right? So we thought about the question of time, the question of this place, which is a 17th century kind of Mughal structure, okay? But we don't live in the 17th century; we live in the 21st century, and we don't. But also in the sense that the passage of time that has passed between the Mughal era and the present, and how we reckon with that, right? So because reckoning with the past is also important. If you societies that don't reckon with the past can become, basically, or don't reckon honestly with the past can become, as pathological and fascist and so on, right? Okay, but of course you don't want to just glorify the past either, because the past was also not a perfect place to be, right? So while there are important lessons to engage with the past, it's also a place that needs to be thought about in from the vantage point of the present, right? So we ended up making a large scale neon work, okay? And so you see an image of this, and this is a large, the hall is about 70 feet long. So it's a large, this dungeon-like space. And since this is a heritage building, it's a Mughal era building, we are not allowed to touch the walls, right? So you cannot kind of drill into the walls or do anything like that, right? So so this neon piece is actually assembled from about 25 different pieces, okay? And so it was made in a workshop. We worked with a neon workshop in Lahore, and they made it, and then they came and assembled it like a jigsaw puzzle, okay? And it simply just sits on the floor, so it doesn't, so it respects the heritage character of the building. So it both, in a sense, but formally what it does is it both respects the heritage character, but also, in a sense, resists it to some degree. And let me speak about how it does that. So what it does is that it thinks about its form in relation to the building, which is full of, as I mentioned, these hidden passageways and water channels and so on. But Mughal architecture is very formal, right? It's very kind of geometric and formal, okay? Whereas our intervention, which is also like a maze, okay, is much more playful, okay, as you can see. And in fact, this is based on those children's puzzles, you know, where you have to trace the right answer, you know, with you know, the turtle has to go back to the river, and there's a maze and you trace the right answer. So the right answer here is given to you already with the red neon, okay? And the wrong places are the ones that which are here, in which you don't go to the right to the solution, okay? What it does is that it also thinks about the connection between the outside, the daylight outside, and the darkness inside. So about the question of night and day, but also about the question of the passage of time itself, right? Night or day become the kind of the metaphor for the passage of time. And here we were reading a poem by the poet Muhammad Iqbal, who wrote a very important poem called The Mosque of Cordoba, right? And he begins with these philosophical kind of thoughts about the passage of time. He says the succession of night and day is the architects of events, right? So that's one of the verses. And another verse that we found important was the succession of night and day is a two-tone silken twine. So he's saying that the night and day are like if you take two threads of silk, right, of two different colors and braid them together. Okay, so that is the succession of night and day. So we thought about, you know, his poem. We thought about the colors of the neon, okay, which are primarily, in this case, blue and red, to kind of think about this notion of a two-tone silken twine, right? But now, of course, interpreted in a very modern, you know, industrial material, right? And also we thought about, and the Lahore fort is also a place where just outside the Ravi river used to flow. Okay, it doesn't flow there anymore. It changed course, but in the 17th century, when this palace was built, the Ravi was actually used to flow, you know, outside. So the question of flow, which is interpreted metaphorically as passage, which also is interpreted in terms of the difference between the past and the present, right? And these are actually the verses from Iqbal's you know, poem that we also had as kind of pendants to the work. Okay, and this work was shown for the duration of the biennial and then destroyed, right? So it was a site-specific temporary work. So it lasted only 2 weeks. So the only documentation now are these photographs and what other people have taken. Okay, and I'll show the last work that I'll show from our work is a series called Fluorescence. Okay, and so the word efflorescence in English has kind of two meanings, right? So it can mean something like the blooming of a flower or a civilization, okay? But it also has these negative associations, which, so for example, if you have a cement wall and it gets discolored, you know, then you say this is an efflorescence that has taken place. In other words, that there is something which has bloomed or discolored or stained the cement wall. So it has both these positive and negative associations. And we thought about this when we were also thinking about the notion of nationalism, right? And in nationalism and borders and how various nation states take up, you know, emblems, you know, or symbols to you know. So, for example, you know, the flag obviously is a very charged symbol, but there are other symbols also, right, which are you know, flowers or birds or etc. And so we thought that we would work with the idea of flowers, right, as national symbols. So the work has been shown in a number of places, but the last place it was shown in was last year in a place called Kettle's Yard, which is a gallery associated with the University of Cambridge. And it was a show on India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, right? And so we thought that we would make the work. We made new work for it because this is an ongoing series, right? So this one is a new work, which is the national flower of Afghanistan, the lale, right? And this is a work that is remade for this space, the Padma, which is the national flower of India. Okay, and so you get a sense of the way, and because it was shown over the winter months, so it worked where it gets very dark in England, pretty early on in the evening. So you see a lot of, this is the way it looks like during the day, but also, I mean, it's dark most of the time, in the. But one of them was shown inside the gallery, right? So, and which is the shapla, which is the national flower of Bangladesh, right? And with these we work with neon fabrication companies, right? To make these. These are large scale, as you can see, right? 4 feet. So what happens when you take something like a flower that is like organic and delicate, and then you make it into this kind of a large scale industrial kind of sign, right? So it does some violence to the flower. And it makes it both, I would think both kind of attractive and creepy at the same time, right? In the sense that they are attractive because they are neon and they glow and they cast this radiance. And especially when they're seen together, they create a field of kind of light. Okay, but then they're also kind of hard-edged kind of and really cold industrial forms, right? So it's in some ways it recalls both the kind of the allure of nationalism, but also it's the way it kind of hardens certain beliefs and so on vis-a-vis other people. Okay, so just some details of this is the shapla, and this is the lale, right? And then this is the padma. Okay. All right. And now I wanted to show you some works by some other artists, okay? And so Vidya and Diana asked me to also show works, and I thought that since you are groups from Bangladesh and India, that you will be familiar with groups working in India and Bangladesh. The Shomoy group, for example, I think is a very important one for for actually the history of collectives in South Asia. And also for me, they are important because they ventured into popular culture, early on, right? But I thought I would show you, but I think you may be exposed to those through, your own knowledge or other discussions. And I thought I would show you a couple of groups from who have been working in Lahore recently, and a group that works from Central Asia who showed in the Lahore Biennial. Okay. So let me first show you the first group, which is the Awami Art Collective, okay? And I'll show one of their projects. So the Awami Art Collective is a group, it is a collective of about, more than 10 people. Not all of them are artists, some of them are writers, and, it was organized by Farida Batul, who is based in Lahore, and she is a professor at the National College of Art, right? So, so it's a group, kind of in a sense headed by her, but it has more than 10 people in it, and their interest is, they call themselves the Awami Art Collective or the People's Art Collective. So their intention is to work in the public arena and to really make works that deal with kind of issues of kind of human rights and social justice, right? So that's really their emphasis. And so the project I want to show is just one of them, which is called Black Spring, and this is a work they made in which is set in the old city or the walled city of Lahore, right? So so these are just some images of the walled city of Lahore. The black and white one is really, from the early 20th century, okay? And the two color images are contemporary images that show you how the walled city has more or less continued to have this kind of dense, built form, right, till today. And what the other thing that the walled city was, kind of, famous for was a festival in spring called Basant, okay, Basant. And Basant was a very beloved festival in Lahore, and where people would, it was associated with the color kind of yellow. It was associated with the coming of spring, and people would, kind of in a sense enjoy themselves. And people would also fly kites, especially, like kite flying during Basant was a big part of Basant. Okay, and you can see how the walled city would be an ideal place to do kite flying, right, from the rooftops. But the Basant has been actually banned by the Pakistani government, right? So the reasons the Pakistani government gave were that had to do with issues of safety, right? The kids would fall off the rooftops and so on, okay, and the dangers of kite flying. But in a sense, Basant has been the target of of some groups that also believe that Basant is not it's not a Muslim festival, right? So it has associations with Hinduism and so on. So Basant is currently it's still banned, but it's an object of great. It's become a site for groups like the Awami Art Collective to make an intervention. So the intervention they made was actually a light piece, okay. And here, what they did is that because they work closely with communities, they actually know a lot of people in the walled city, the people who live there, the people who work there, including shops and so on, right? And they worked with the communities for their permission to do this light installation, right? And the light installation, this is a kind of a shot from a drone. I apologize that it's not so clear, but you get a sense of the walled city. That this is the Badshahi Mosque. This is also a mosque from the 17th century, okay? And this is their intervention, right? And when you come to the rooftop, it looks like this, okay? What they've done is they've basically taken these LED strands, okay, that you can buy commercially in the market. And they have strung these LED strands to, in a sense, trace the architecture of the walled city, right, in this kind of poetic way. And you can see another shot here, for example, okay, and which is that you see the rooftops and you see the LED kind of the strand which is draping the architectural structures, okay. And here's another shot, okay. These things are pigeon cages, okay. So these structures. So the pigeon flying was also an important pastime in the walled city since so for a long time, right? Or something like this. We see this would be a Deco era building, but it's still built to conform to the fabric of the walled city, right? And or something like this, right, where you overlook the street. So one of their kind of concerns in a way was to think about Basant, okay. The other concern had to do with a mass transit system that's being put in Lahore. So there's a mass transit system that is actually was being put in very, very quickly in Lahore, okay, and including its route was going through some historic neighborhoods, and the government was so intent on pushing this through that they didn't sufficiently attend to the questions of heritage and so on, right? So which was also another point of debate and contention among the Lahori kind of human rights communities and social justice communities and artistic communities. So in some ways, the color of this, which is kind of orange red, also recalls the Orange Line. The Orange Line is the name of the mass transit line that was going to go through near this neighborhood. Okay. Okay. Another project I'll show is a project called the Pak Khawateen Painting Club. Okay. So the Pak Khawateen Painting Club is, so first let me explain the name. It's called Pak is taken from Pakistan, of course, but also from Pure Pakistani Women's Painting Club. Okay, and this is a group of artists. Here they are. There are 6 of them. Okay, and some of them teach at the National College of Art. Okay, And what they did is that they decided to think about the role of rivers and dams in Pakistan. As you may know, Pakistan has there are important rivers that flow, including the Indus River, down the length of Pakistan, and they've become an important site for dams, for mega structures, for construction, but also for displacing people due to dams, right? So you can see that this is their. So what they did is that they came up with this idea of making a kind of a Sunday painting club by these women painters, So this was their guise, if you will, or their kind of persona that they adopted, and they made these uniforms, okay, and with these logos and everything, with these badges, okay, and there ostensibly they would go to these sites, to these dams, and then they would do these landscape. The idea is that they're just women painters who want to paint the beautiful landscape, okay, okay. But actually, what they do by doing so, they managed to get into dialogue with the officials, okay, with the people who are involved in both managing and taking care of the dams, right? But also the communities that have been displaced and affected by displacement due to the work of dams, okay. And so they made a project based on their work, which was shown at the second Lahore Biennial, okay. And so the way they present this work is that they have, well, this is a mannequin with their uniform, okay. But the rest of these are these, like they look like machinery that you might find in the engine room or the control room of the dam, right? So this kind of like modernist 50s, 60s kind of industrial design, okay, of machinery. And it has, as you can see, there are videos that play. There is sound you can hear. There are various buttons you can push to activate various audio visual components of this, okay. And a lot of it has to do with the record of the documentation of their work. So, videos that play or interviews they have with activists or displaced people that play, alongside with this, along with things like geological samples and kind of, archival material that is presented here. Okay. And so it's done. So it's taking something that's actually quite serious, but addressing it from a kind of a playful angle. Okay. And which both allowed them to gain access to things that would have been difficult otherwise, okay, but also ways in which they could retain a sense of. So when you listen to all the audio-visual presentations, you actually it's not clearly against dams, right? What it does is that it presents a kind of a multifaceted and nuanced picture of this kind of immense development that, is been going on from the time of the British and continues till today, right? Which is that are dams good or bad? That's not a simple answer. And I think they don't give a simple answer by bringing you all of these multiple voices in these different ways, okay? Okay, and the last project I'll show is a project actually by Central Asian artists, okay? And this is a project which was shown also at the Lahore Biennial, the last one, which was earlier in 2020, okay? And this is a project called Ulugh Beg, Intrinsic Futuristic Machine of Central Asia, okay? And it was the main artist was an artist who's from Kazakhstan, okay, and is a well-known international artist, Almagul Menlibayeva, okay, and she invited two other artists to collaborate with her, okay. So Ina Artemova is, she's an artist, works on paper and canvas, and German Popov works with sound, okay, and the site they chose was this planetarium building. Okay, now this planetarium building was built, this is during the modernist era, and it's actually now not in use. Okay, it's, as you can see, it's a building that's, there is a planetarium machinery, and it's the architecture is there, but it's no longer in use. So they decided to use it, and when you enter the circular, kind of. you know, downstairs you have this kind of circular space with this with this globe in the middle, right, and a circular bench. And Ina Artemova's project was to kind of create a site-specific intervention of these black and white, you know, drawings. Okay, that think about kind of you know, kind of space and planarity and fractured kind of industrial forms, okay, but also visionary forms, okay, geometric visionary forms that you have in this very kind of dynamic kind of composition, right? Okay, and when you go upstairs, okay, you come to the planetarium proper, okay, and where Almagul Menlibaeva created a multi-channel video installation, which is about 10 video installations, okay, and they are projected on the walls of the planetarium. And German Popov is made the sound, you know, for it, okay. He's a sound artist. So I'm just going to play one of, you know, it's very hard to show you these in the photographs because they are, it's a circular space, but I'll play a little bit of a video which will give you a sense of the way the space was used, okay?
All these natural human beings to fly. But, so we went to Samarkand and we made this, we collected this collection. We met with astronomers, with scientists, with musicians. We were talking about the legacy of Sultan Al-Qaeda. Created this film. I made the sound, and Inna, she is an architect. She is an architect from Moscow. She works with doctrines and topics of utopia. So we try to create some kind of multidisciplinary project. So downstairs you see the installation that was made by Inna. It's around the globe. There is a room with 3 strange-looking objects hanging. I will explain later what it is. We will have time for it. Hopefully we will. Perhaps I should give a few words to say to them.
Okay, and I'll obtain another.
Hello, thank you for coming.
This is Nagol giving her presentation. And the third one I'll play is the music, okay? And I'll explain the significance of the music. So let me explain the significance of the project. So this is a very, very interesting project. Ulugh Bey was an astronomer in Central Asia who created actually an observatory, which was, you know, one of the most accurate observatories of his time to kind of measure the, you know, the celestial, the heavens and so on. Okay. And but during this time, you also have music is also, astronomy is also concerned with what would be called the music of the heavens, right? So there's a way in which there's an analog created between astronomical observations and the way the heavenly bodies move and create you know, a symphony or a music, right? But what kind of music, right? So part of German Popov and Almagul's intervention is to think about the differences between like Western tonal music and Central Asian music, which is really based on kind of, maqam and Persianate kind of, ways of composition. Okay, so so they have interviews with astronomers, also with instrument makers. Okay, but then they also have this, during the Soviet era, Ulugh Bey was used as there was a soap, like a movie made about Ulugh Bey, okay, about him as an astronomer. So they reenact that movie, which is a kind of, if you think about a Soviet era kind of a historical film about Central Asia, So it combines all of these layers, right? It combines the images of the actual observatory, the manuscripts that you see here, okay, the differences in musics and the relation to kind of what might be called heavenly music, and then also the way the Soviets interpreted this and how we receive this history today, okay, through all of these layers. Okay, so I think I'm going to stop sharing, and I hope we have some time for Q&A or discussion.
Thanks, Iftikhar. That was great.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Iftikhar. That was really very interesting. And I think in the way that you kind of opened up this whole idea of collaboration, also when you kind of positioned the way that, the practice is constantly.
Ooh, Vidya, the line is bad. You're breaking up. Vidya, are you frozen? I think we've lost.
Yeah, she seems frozen in my image.
Yeah.
I think she might just re-enter.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll just give it a minute.
Okay, for the other points that I thought were really interesting that you brought in is, how do you credit the fabricators in the process? How do you credit the community? Like, you're looking at collaboration on so many different layers, and you're absolutely right in terms of setting up those terms for collaboration in the beginning. There's several examples that I can think of, I mean, not public ones, but, where artists collaborate at the beginning. They don't clarify, so for example, when you guys make this digital commission, it belongs to you. If you want to sell it one day, how do you split those proceeds? What's the fine, you have to think of all these things as the work exists, later in the world, because if those misunderstandings are there, it can kind of spoil that spirit of collaboration. So that's definitely, I'm glad you raised that on a practical level, Iftikhar. But also who gets credited in the project. I think in theater or in dance, you have these playbills, and kind of everyone who's working on the project is like kind of in the credits. It's not like that in the visual arts yet.
Yeah, I mean, my which, in the sense that this is obviously a very, you're not going to get it completely right, okay? In the sense that if you want to engage with what I said is this, the larger world of production, and making and creativity, which we have a great deal of in South Asia, then you're going to be put in sometimes in uncomfortable or in situations where you don't quite know how to credit. So it's easy enough to say, well, if you're all like quote unquote artists, right, then you all can, you make a work, all of you are collaborators in that event. But we have to understand that the world of art is privileged, right? So in other words, that even though, many of us are, may not have an income and may be struggling, okay, to live and make a work, we still have enormous privilege as artists, okay? Just the fact of being artists compared to an artisan, okay? To a tailor or a welder or somebody who doesn't have that voice, okay, and so on. So I think one of the ways, there's no harm, in other words, to be generous, okay? And why not have a playbill with everyone listed? Okay, why not share profits? If you sell the work, why not be generous with your if you've made some money in which somebody has helped you to realize it. And I also think there's a difference between let's say the company that makes the fluorescence pieces in neon in the UK or the US. These are like established companies with they are not in the informal realm. You see what I'm saying? They are not people without a name there. So in a sense that can be more of a transaction that is bound by legal contracts and so on, right? You give them an advance, you get an invoice, in the sense, okay? But what if you're working with, let's say, somebody who does zari work or tailoring or welding or work like that? Then I think the question of acknowledgement becomes much more, I think, important, okay? Which is not, I'm not saying don't, I'm saying do it, but do it with knowing that, these are things that are worth your while to think about an address rather than not to think about them, okay? Okay, and I don't have a magic, in a sense, generally speaking, the more acknowledged the better, and the more sharing the better, but I don't have a magic, there is no one formula for this, right? That's what I would say.
It's also interesting in terms of like fabrication instructions moving across borders too, right? Like there's different ways to think of. So kind of for this project, the constraints are no shipping, no travel. So how can this work circulate in the world? But it doesn't have to be something that's on a screen. I think I'm interested to see who pushes the possibilities of that as far as possible. Again, a big neon like yours that can't, and with a small budget like what we have, and also for the ecology, it doesn't make sense to print that neon or fabricate that neon in lots of different cities and destroy it after 2 weeks.
Right,
but
right.
yeah, but it is interesting, like the piece that was critiquing the railway line. Like in theory, one could look at how do you say different plans on different sides of the border and do something digitally connecting that. Anyway, I'm rambling, but it's interesting when you think about how instructions can pass digitally and make physical objects.
Yeah, so I think, again, also the question of ecology, and, we talk about carbon footprint and so on, right? So, these are also about waste and ecology but, in some sense, the artistic economy is really not a productive economy, right? It's, in other words, partly what art needs to do is trouble certainties in society, right? So you have to take risks to create trouble, okay? And the question of taking risks also means sometimes not doing things that are necessarily politically correct in that way, right? In the sense that so in other words, if there is a work that's, that neon work was, it ended up costing me a lot of money and it got destroyed. And in some sense, it's contributing to waste, right? Okay.
But what it contributes to memory and experience and ideas, like, that's something.
Right, but it also contributes to all of that, and it, in the sense that if there's a work that that is confrontational even in that way, which is thinking about waste and destruction and excess consumption, I don't think, artists should be able to do that, right? Okay, so while I'm all for being sensitive to to the ecology and so on, I think the more important question is you're not going to contribute to ecological destruction by one work, okay? But you may be able to bring attention to those issues by that work. You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah. No, I more meant it in the sense that if that work, let's say if we wanted to circulate it all over the world and suddenly like that same work gets printed in New York, gets printed in, it was made for a specific context. It wasn't meant to circulate like that.
Yeah. So, it's, in the sense that, we artists, I think that this is the balance between obviously being progressive and forward in our values, right? Which we all want to be, but also at the same time balancing that with doing things that are risky, okay? And not playing it safe in your work.
I'm sure some of our 22 Indian and Bangladeshi artists must have some questions or comments. Let's.
Yeah, I do. Hi, Iftikhar. Good morning. Maybe it's
Morning.
still morning there.
Still
Yeah, I'm very excited to see the last project. It actually gave me a lot of ideas, but I wanted to ask you a question from there, I'm very much excited to know about this formal realm and the informal realm, but I want to merge this and ask you this question of how do we merge this formal and informal in the digital realm? Because we are right now collaborating from screens, right? Over just voice is something we get triggered with. Our emotions work with that only. So how can this, two realms come to the digital realm?
Yeah, I mean, the digital realm is actually full of, what the digital realm has actually enabled, is actually the voices that we never heard are now, being heard, right? So in other words, everyone has a cell phone, everyone has TikTok account or whatever, So in the sense that you have, even like rickshawalas and, people like that have, and the means, a very sophisticated means of communication now that they never had like 20, 30 years ago, right? In the same way. So I think the digital realm is immense, right? And it is again both formal and informal. You have on the formal level, you have YouTube, and you have but even YouTube, you have like an endless number of kind of videos and so on. So you have I think the question you have in the digital realm is much more expanded, right? Because you have actually a plurality of voices, okay, and some of them are not so politically pleasant, okay, because there's a lot of as there's a lot of hate groups and so on also pushing their messages in the digital realm. But that's the realm, right? That's the realm of both promise and possibility, and it's very, very large, right? So so it's
Bombarding from all ways, like it's getting bombarded from all ways.
Yeah, it's getting bombarded from all ways in which you're all contributors and consumers,
Yes.
right? And the sphere is growing ever larger, right? At all levels. So I think this is a very productive place to be engaged with, right? And again, you're going to, like if I knew what the answer was, I would do it. You know what I'm saying? In the sense that it needs experimentation, okay?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
to think about ideas of how you want to, if this is your playground, if you will, okay, then how are you going to make your play, okay? So that's what you have to do together, right? In the sense that you come up with a project, test out something, right? And that's okay. It's okay to experiment and test out. That's the fun of art making, right?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
I wonder if you could speak a little bit to some of the challenges you might have faced during, say, cross-border collaboration, such as with Nalini Malani, or it might be interesting to think about how you may have like circumvented certain circumstances and thought through things.
The situation in, look, I mean, South Asia is actually I'm very happy you are all together because, actually, if you look at South Asia compared to the rest of the world, we are in really bad shape in terms of borders, okay? So Southeast Asia, people can travel and talk to each other, okay? In Africa, even Africans complain that they don't have direct flights, but they don't have the kind of border hostilities that we have in South Asia. So we are actually in the worst possible place in the world, right? 25% of the world population that doesn't talk to each other, okay? So it's really terrible, okay? And I think, there are, I'm old enough that this, I'm from before the age of the internet, right? It was much harder then. It was much harder that you wouldn't even know. When I was growing up in like Karachi, I mean, my family are both migrants my mother and father are both migrants from India. But I couldn't even visit India until 1997, right? And and I never even saw a picture of my relatives, that even in the mail. You see what I'm saying? Like I had no conception of, I mean, I knew of some Indian artists, those that I had met or had met in the 90s, primarily in the UK and in like Europe and so on, okay? But, and that was my connection. So I think between that time and now is a very big, the borders are arguably worse today in many places, right? we have kind of right-wing governments in many countries, and they are not playing a good role, So things are worse off, politically speaking, I would say, in some ways today than they were, like, let's say 10 years ago. Okay. On the other hand, we also have, the internet, and we have abilities for people to come together on Zoom and so on. So I think, in the sense, it's always going to be there. It's never going to be a utopia. As far as I can tell, it's not going to be a utopia in my lifetime. Okay. But that doesn't mean that one doesn't, avail of what's possible and engage, right? I mean, what we are doing today is another kind of engagement. You see what I'm saying? So, these may seem like small things, but these are meaningful, and they matter over time if you continue to, kind of, in a sense, do them consistently.
Yeah, I think, Iftikhar, when you spoke about this kind of larger productive realm that you're part of, and that was very interesting for me to just and look at projects where I'm looking at the rooftops in the old city of Lahore, and how that's sort of being mobilized both as a kind of a drone image, but also as something that the entire neighborhood is participating in. And I think that imagination, of course, the mediation might be through the screen, but we're also plugged into these larger worlds around us. And I think that could be something to really consider and think around. And then the whole term of collaboration, which works at so many levels, right? Like, even the way that you're engaging with architectural sites, and there's this, I think there's a kind of dialogue that's happening at every level in terms of all the works that we saw. Which seems like a very interesting process. So I think it was very helpful, at least in the context, especially in the context of today's conversation and yesterday's conversation, where this group has sort of just shared their works, and they're now trying to think around how we could get together and propose ideas and get to know each other also in that process.
So you will be paired one to one, or is that
yeah. So now we've left them with a slightly difficult and open-ended task of sort of having to get to know and develop projects with other people. So they have access to each other's works in terms of the PDFs that they've submitted, and then they can sort of think around how they could carry these conversations forward and develop proposals.
Yeah, so maybe finding things that are of interest to both, and then thinking about, and of course, there's a form in which it has to be a digital form or something, right? So, which can, so that of course also is good in the sense that, but even the digital realm, you have many mediums, right? You have text, you have video, you have sound, you have multimedia kind of. Yeah, so good. Okay.
I wanted to ask you something about the act of making a proposal itself.
Yes.
Me personally, whenever I have to sit down and write a proposal, I feel like a part of my soul just dies, Very, I don't know, like you have these ideas of how you should sound versus what you haven't actually figured out yet, and you don't need to until you're making, but you don't want the proposal to be too far away from what it ends up becoming, and it's just the whole process is quite unpleasant, to say the least. But yesterday when you were talking, and I don't remember who it was, but maybe someone from FICA said, maybe Diana said that the proposal making itself could be the fun part of this, because at the end of the day, a lot of proposals are going to be generated, but not there's only one work that would actually be made, at least through this program. And I was wondering, how do I make that fun? Has that ever been fun for anyone? And I'm wondering how you approach proposal making.
Yeah. No, I would agree with Diana, and also writing is something that, you develop. Okay. So I did engineering before I turned to art. So, I wasn't like, in the sense that I think I'm a better writer. I'm not saying I'm a great writer, but I'm a better writer today than I was, earlier on, because it's something, when you engage with it, then it becomes easier, right? And it becomes, actually, it's also productive in the sense that you can think that as you write, it enables your thinking, right? So it helps you. You may have an idea, but when it's actually when you sit down and write it up, that it helps you clarify exactly what, you know, the domain of that idea, the stakes of that idea, what the purchase of that idea is, right? So I think it's you know, it could be a good exercise to, you know, to if you maintain a notebook or something to jot down your ideas, you know, those could be basis for, I mean, as artists, you do this in art school, right? You're encouraged to keep journals and so on, right? So that, I mean, those could provide the nuclei for your proposal, right? Which is things that you're thinking of already, things that are important to you, right? And the proposal, you know, as I mentioned, that the proposals you get usually have some kind of constraints, right? So like in the Lahore Biennial, we had the constraint of responding to this Mughal structure, for example, right? Okay. So, and constraints are both kind of, you know, obviously, you know, can be crippling, but can also be enabling, right? It helps you to, so when you visit the space, you think about its character, you think about its nature, and then you think about, you know, how that resonates with what you're already thinking and kind of and doing, right? And I usually find, I mean, one of the things I would say that in the contemporary art world is full of jargon, you know, and I personally don't like that kind of language because I don't think it helps me, you know. So if it's overlaid with jargon, I think I just my eyes glaze over, basically, right? I prefer proposals or ideas about art that are very clearly, and you know, they don't have to be simple. I'm not talking about being simplistic. I'm talking about you know, writing in a very clear expository or even in a poetic manner, as long as it conveys the sense of you know, what is it is that it relates to your experience and your work, rather than quoting Deleuze or something. Do you see what I'm saying? Okay. So don't hang things on Deleuze. I mean, Deleuze comes in if you need him, but it really has to be your voice, right?
Yeah, and Iftikhar, I would add to that, like, I think now is also like one of the thinkers that really influences me a lot is Sarah Ahmed. And she talks about like, why are we citing all these white guys in our book? Like, I'm saying this in like a very crass way, but like, you know, it's, or I was also talking to two artists like Monem Wasif and Ritu Sattar the other day, and they're like, okay, if someone talks about Joseph Beuys, no context needs to be given. But, you know, if we talk about someone from South Asia, it needs like a, you know, dictionary to be able to describe that. So how to also like empower local references. Don't think like, you know, there's no need to cite something that everyone else is citing. Let's like shift things with our generation. And I have to write, you know, I have a lot of these kind of curatorial proposals for biennials and stuff that often don't go anywhere, but the thinking process is fantastic, right? Because you kind of hash through ideas. I like to co-curate things more than I like doing things on my own. And we have these great Google Docs and WhatsApp groups where like we're sharing texts and we're sharing references. And even for some of these that don't go through, the groups are still active as we see works that kind of align to that thinking. So yes, think of it as almost like a jam session or something, because you learn so much in the process. And you can always realize this somewhere else, right? Like it's you have it ready, and when the right context is there, it's ready to fire off, because these proposals belong to you.
Yeah, no, Diana, I agree in the sense that, well, artists work differently, but I think in general, it's a good thing to be thinking about your work and to be writing ideas and notes down, and even writing, you know, so proposal writing can be an occasion to kind of develop your ideas, even if they don't go anywhere. I mean, we are all familiar with this, right? Even we write, you know, I mean, you all end up writing proposals for, you know, shows and opportunities and grants that we will not get, okay? But that's not a waste, right? As Diana is saying, it helps to, you know, it helps to develop your own thinking and your own ideas, right?
Hi, I have a question.
Sure.
So you were talking about the right wing and borders and all that. So when we do an artwork about like topics that are very are heated, or like about abuse or about riots, so artworks about that So we make the artwork beautiful. We don't really make the artwork violent per se. So does that, like, as an artist, should we do that? Like, should we make an artwork that is beautiful about a topic that is not beautiful, that is really controversial, or uh, you know, needs to be spoken in a way that says, does justice to it? Like, rights
Yeah,
are about abuse, domestic abuse, but we are making artworks that are, beautiful.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is, there is again no one answer to this, I would say. And this is a very actually important, question. Thank you for that. I would say that beauty can be, beauty can be accused of covering up kind of ugly realities of society, right? So that's a critique that will say, well, if life itself is ugly and terrible, then why would you cover it up with a symbol that is beautiful, right? On the other hand, the counter argument can also be made, okay, which is to say that it is beauty that will compel the viewer, not repetition of what is already media images, right? So in other words, if you just make another media image, it will get lost in the millions and millions of other media images about violence and abuse. Okay, it's really something that you make that has the power to compel the viewer to pay attention, right? And and beauty could be one, like beauty and pleasure is one strategy, right? I mean, from the rise of conceptual art, we've had this anti-aesthetic impulse, right? So to say that aesthetic is actually something that is that doesn't have a critical potential. But I think we are beyond that, right? So I think I would say there's no one way to do it. So I think it really has to depend on the project, the thing you're looking at, the thing that it concerns you, and the project that you're, and see what is a best, So art world, I would say, for me personally, I let me give the example of the Black Spring, which is the Awami Art Collective I just showed you, right? So they're actually dealing with, they're actually if you talk to them, they're very angry, right? So the artists, and for justifiable reasons, because they're very angry of all the terrible things that are happening in Pakistan, right? The killing of Shias, the banning of Basant, and so on and so forth, right? The violence against minorities, right? But this project, I felt like, and they've done other projects that are more, about, let's say, that the people who disappeared, they made flags with their names and put them in a roundabout and so on, right? So I think those are also heartfelt, important projects, but this one appeals to me more. This is a more allegorical, beautiful project that appeals to me more, right? And lingers with me in a way that that I think about Basant, I think about, the violence of modernization, I think about marginalized communities in ways that stays with me, okay? So I think it, and similarly with, let's say the Fluorescence, I mean, at some level they are about borders and, hardening of identities and so on, okay? But they're also, we like to think as important works in their own right. I mean, they have to, so there are, and I think people will have different approaches to this. I'm telling you what my preferences are, but that's my own preferences in terms of how I think about works that are very literal, don't appeal to me, okay? Which simply reproduce reality don't appeal to me because I see reality anyway. So it doesn't do anything more, it doesn't add anything for me, right? In terms of thought or reflection or sensory, intellectual approach or sensory approach or an engagement. So I think of art, I mean, I think as artists, we all have a voice and we all have the capacity to kind of reflect on what we are seeing. There may be very terrible things, and to make work that is thoughtful, okay? Above all, for me. But I'm saying that there is no one, I mean, there's no one way to do it, right? Do you take something that's ugly and produce even an uglier symbol that, that people can't bear to look at? I'm not, I don't know. I mean, I think disgust, disgust and so on can also be powerful, visceral kind of ways of responding to work. So.
Thank you so much.
I had a question. Coming back to the collaboration part, uh, I was thinking about how does this balance between the negotiation between two or more people works. Like, if you're working with an artisan, then still there is a kind of a hierarchy. But from the point of view of the artisan, like, do they feel satisfied? I mean, there is obviously money involved that, okay, you're paying the person, but in terms of credits or in terms of, showing the work, uh, not just while collaborating with artisans, but with two or more people who are also like peers, your peers. So how does one come to that? Like, how does the negotiation work, and what balances it, or what brings?
So, I mean, people take different approaches to this. So, as I mentioned, we are all artists. So, we, in some ways, we inhabit a kind of a status in society that many other people don't share, right? So, even though you may be the most broken, artist who's, but you still have a social position that is far greater than, an artisan, okay, in our societies, okay? So at some level, we exist at the level of art, and as artists in the formal realm of artists, and we have a kind of equivalence there. You can claim a kind of equivalence, right, with people. So if you're collaborating with other artists, you have, and this happens a lot. Like, for example, for this Ulugh Bay project, it was actually the curator who is Hurul Qasimi. She had invited Almagul Manlibayeva, who then asked her to German Popov and Ina to collaborate with her. Okay, so their names appear in the project. Okay, it's harder when you, as I mentioned, when you deal with the realm of informality and the artisanal world, because this is actually an important world for our societies. And many artists work this way, right? And the question of acknowledgement and collaboration is an important one to think about and do. But I'm saying be as generous as possible, okay? But it's always going to be a hierarchical relationship, because you have access to English language, you have access to forums like this. You have access to galleries and opportunities that you can apply abroad. You see what I'm saying? You're always going to have a realm. Your voice will always have realms that don't. So use your privilege, for some degree of equality. Okay, yeah, in society. Okay, and again, I don't have formulas for. Generally the principle is be as generous and acknowledging as possible. But I don't have fixed formulas for something like this on how to do this.
Could you tell us a little bit about how the projects that you spoke of by the Awami Collective and the women's painters group, the Sunday group, how did they meet? How did they get together? How did they form as a collective?
Yeah, so these are both collectives based in Lahore. Okay, and so Lahore actually has a very because the National College of Art has been there since the 19th century and is an important place actually in Pakistan. Many of the leading artists and the best artists are also teaching, right? So they're also teaching either at the National College of Art or one of the other art colleges. Lahore has another art college called the Beacon House National University. Okay, so and actually there are lots of artists living in Lahore. So Lahore is a place where a lot of these artists graduate from these institutions and settle in Lahore, right? They may be from other parts of Pakistan. So there is a kind of a, and so for example, Sabah Khan, who organized the Pak Khawateen, teaches at NCA, right? And so does Farida Batul, who organized the Awami Art Collective. So these are people, either her fellow teachers or classmates or people she met, like-minded people, she's met through activism, or students, they become kind of part of the collective in that way. I mean, you have different models of collective, right? There are what I would call the very strict collectives where the individual never has a separate identity. Like if you think of like Rux Media Collective or something, right? The Rux Media Collective members never individually make their own work, right? They only make work together as Rux Media Collective. But there are other models of collective. That's not the only model, is what I'm saying. There are other models in which people make work and then collaborate on certain projects. So see what's appropriate for you, right? What makes sense for you. So what I'm saying is, think of collectives in a kind of in plural and wide registers. Don't think of it as just there's no one way to do it. Okay. Okay. What makes sense for you and your partners, right? And collectives also, like sometimes they come together for a while and they dissolve, and that's okay too. It's okay if a collective dissolves, because it may have served, you may have engaged in a project at a certain stage in your life and engaged with those questions, and then you may have moved on. So, which is also okay.
Any other questions? Or perhaps you can then. Thank you so much, Iftikhar. I think this was a wonderful session, and I think it gave a kind of, both in terms of just your own works and the way that you're kind of thinking about this at many registers. And I think as we embark on this process, it has given us some kind of orientation. And of course, as you say, we have to all find our own ways of doing this. So thank you so much for your time.
No, thank you for inviting me. I'm so happy you're all together, and yes. I look forward to see what comes out of this. So.
Yeah, we'll keep you posted as this develops.
Yeah, good luck, everyone.
Thank you.
Invest.
Thank you.
Bye.